Lesson 15 is on classes and objects. Java is an object-oriented programming language, and we really haven't talked about what that means yet, but that's what we're going to start talking about with this lesson. So in Java, we make an object, which is kind of a blueprint for what things are going to look like, and then we make copies of that thing and use that thing. So one of the analogies they have is that a cookie cutter can make a lot of different cookies. So a class is like a cookie cutter, and then each of the objects are like the individual cookies. So I think this is easier to understand if we try to do some examples and then explain as we go along. So we're going to make two classes from now on. We're going to make one class and we're going to call it circle, but we're not going to include a main in that class. So let me copy the code for the circle class. And I'm not going to create a main. I'm going to put in my circle class and I'm going to save that. And then let's take a look at what's inside the circle class. So first of all, the name is circle, and inside every circle class you have what's called a constructor. So public circle is the constructor. The constructor has a double inside it that's R, and that R is going to stand for the radius. So the radius of our circle will be defined when we create it. And then this object is going to have some methods that go along with the object. The first method is going to be called area. And if we run the area method, it's not going to need any information other than when we run it, we'll name the circle that we're trying to find the area of, and it will do the math to find out that the area is math.pi times the radius, and it will return that number to us. Something else that might be interesting about the circle might be the circumference. So we have a method called circumference. It's going to use the letter C. It's 2 times pi times the radius, and it will return that number. And then, so those are the two methods. And then the last thing is a state variable, which is also called an instance field or a data member. And that is available to the methods in this class, and that's going to be radius. So every circle that we create will have a radius. That radius is going to be a double. And it's public, so it's going to be available for everything to use. So that's the way that the circle class is created. Now the way it's used is by making another class. And so we're going to make a class called circle tester and copy this code and put it inside the circle tester. Now, if I was making this one myself, I would make a main. However, since I have the code, I can just paste it in there because there was already a main over there. And so what this is going to do is it's going to say that there's a circle. Its name is Sir1. It's new. It's a circle. And the 5.1 is what's going to be passed to the constructor of the circle. If you remember, the circle's constructor took a number and it stored it as the radius. So the first circle will have a radius of 5.1. The second circle will have a radius of 20.6. And I can run that and nothing really happens because I'm not telling it to do anything with those, but there aren't any errors right now. Everything is working exactly as I told it to. So we've made a class, we've made multiple versions of that circle or multiple cookies. We've instantiated them, all right? We've made instances of them. So suppose we'd like to actually do something with that. Let's find out what the area of circle number 2 is, or find out what the radius, first let's find out what the radius of circle number 1 is. So we can go into our circle class and say system.out.println, and we can tell it to print circle1.radius and find out what the radius of circle 1 is. Find out if it actually made it correctly, and it says 5.1 because that's how you print the radius. Let's see, what if we want to find out the area of circle number 2? Well, we can't just do cir2.area because area is not a state variable. It's a method inside the class that returns something. It returns the radius. So, or it returns the area. So about circle 2, I want to find out what the area is. If I try this, I'll get a compile error. It's a method. I'll put the parentheses after it. And run that. And what's the area? The area is 1,333 because 20 times 20, 20.6 times 20.6 times pi is 1,333. So we created a class. We told it that there's some information every circle has, and that there are some methods that every circle is going to want to be able to tell back when we use the object or use that class. All right. There's a few other things that we're going to take a look at again with those methods. So first of all, access control. You can have things that are public, or you can have things that are private that can only be changed inside a class. And typically, something like the radius would be private because we don't want people outside being able to change the radius of a circle unless we give them permission. So this, a lot of times we would have this be a private method. That means that once we created it, we also wouldn't be able to find out what it was unless we created a method to tell ourselves about that. Every method also has a return data type, whether it's a double or a string. So the area is going to return a double. The circumference is going to return a double, right? And the method names, the names that we used are just fine, but it's not the most common way because a lot of times we talk about getters and setters. So a getter will get information and a setter will change information. So a better way to do this might have been, instead of saying area, to say get area and do that camel case get circumference to find out what the circumference is. And then if I want to do it that way, I've got to come over here and say get area. And so that will get the area of circle 1. So that verb noun convention is really helpful. So what is this going to do? It's going to get the area of circle number 2. Now we can also make some changes to the circles. So I could say cir1 dot radius equals 10. And then if I said system.out.println cir1.radius, we find out what the radius of the first one is, we find out the area of the second, and then we change the radius of the first circle. And then if we print out the radius of the first circle again, now we can see it's been changed to 10.0. Another way to do it would be to actually create a method that will change that. So this is a lot more common. It's a lot more common to make the radius a private, so that we can't change it unless we know how to So if I try running this one, you can see there's a lot of error messages here now. Radius, if I hover over it, it's not visible. We can't find out what it is, and we also can't change it. So it's a lot more common to do it this way. And then inside the circle class, to make a couple more methods. So this is private. So we're going to make a public method that allows us to find out what it is. So public double get radius. And then we're just going to return the radius. And now over here, instead of saying to print the radius, I'm going to say print get radius method. And now if I run it again, it's 5.1, but I don't have the ability to go in and change that radius. And so that's it's a lot safer to create things that way so you can't accidentally change them. If you want to be able to change them, you would have to create a method called setRadius. So setRadius, and setRadius is going to have to accept a double, we'll call it R, and then we will say that the radius equals R. And this one, we could either send back the number that we got, or we can say that this is a public void. Now, a void method doesn't return anything back. It just does what it's supposed to do and then doesn't send any information back. So if we try that one, circle one, we can't say dot radius. We have to say set radius. And instead of saying equals 10, we're going to send 10 to the method. And then if I print it out, we'll find out whether that worked or not. So it looks like it must have, because we got the radius. We found out that it was 10 after we used set radius to change it. So we've been using a lot of the things in the main up till this point. We say public, static, void, main. So those are some important keywords that we've used every single time, but we really haven't explained them up to this point. So public, that means that you can access it from another class or another place. So when we're using our circle class, the get area method, we made it public. The get circumference method, we made it public. The get radius and the set radius, we made them public as well. And then we changed to private this one, so it can only be changed inside this class instead of out. So the main is always public. It's always static, which static means that it's usable correctly. We'll talk more about that later in the class. And then void means it doesn't return anything somewhere else. Since we're running the main from inside its own program, we're not going to send it to another place. So those are a couple things we haven't seen before. For constructors, constructors are always public, and we always have to say that. Then we say the name of what we're constructing, and we always have to name that the same as the class. So the constructor has to be the same name. It doesn't say that it's void, it is, but constructors, we just don't have to say that they're void. That's not necessary. And then sometimes we'll have parameters, sometimes we don't. If the parentheses are empty, then it's just the generic circle. If you don't tell me what my radius is, I'll use whatever generic number we have. If you do say a number, then it'll be whatever number we say. So we might have a constructor in addition to this constructor, we might have another constructor that just says public circle, empty parentheses, and then I've got all of my curly braces all mixed up here. One too many there. There we go. So if I don't send a radius, then I just have to tell it what the default is. I'm going to make the default for a circle to be 1. If I don't tell somebody what the radius is, if I don't tell what the radius is, it's going to be a radius of 1. If I send it a radius, it'll be whatever number is sent along. And that's a good way to create a class.